Okay, welcome to everyone. My name is Scott Appleby. I'm the Dean of the Keough School of Global Affairs. It is my distinct privilege today to introduce our guest speaker. We're delighted to have with us one of Nigeria's, Africa's, and the world's most important and renowned peace builders, faith-based peace builder, Cardinal John Onaiyekan, who has been central to so many good things over many years, not least our own Catholic Peace Building Network that's anchored here at Notre Dame, but is really a global enterprise run by our colleague Jerry Powers, the Associate Caesar Montevecchio. So we're delighted that Cardinal Onaiyekan is here. He is a leader in interreligious peace building, and we know already from the Crockett Center for International Peace Studies and all our studies of peace that we don't have kumbaya peacemakers who sit around and hold hands. That's all great if they do and say wonderful things to one another. We like that part of it. But Cardinal Onaiyekan is not quite in that mold. He's a person who speaks truth to power with great courage. For example, he has been a vociferous critic of poor governance. That's a source of so much conflict across Africa, and particularly in his homeland of Nigeria. And it's also the leaguers, the United States as well. He's not afraid to take on corrupt and undemocratic political leadership and to speak against it. In 2005, for example, he gave a homily in his own home cathedral with the president of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, in the front pew. So imagine that. This man, he's not a diminutive figure physically, as you will see, big man with a booming voice. And he is giving his homily, and the Nigerian president is in the front pew. This is right out of Central Casting in Hollywood. And he doesn't mince words. And he is not worried about being accused of meddling in politics. He called on the president to respect the Constitution of Nigeria and not seek a third term, imploring him to, quote, resist the deadly temptation to want to remain in power perpetually by hook or by crook. I think he probably emphasized the word crook there, but I don't know. That's a direct quote. Your Eminence, we would like to have you here in the United States to give similar speeches in DC and elsewhere. Cardinal Onaiyekan is Metropolitan Archbishop Emeritus of Abuja, Nigeria, where he was named bishop in 1992. He became a cardinal in 2012. He served as president of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Nigeria and president of CECOM, the Conference of Episcopal Conferences in Africa and Madagascar, as well as serving on several Vatican dicasteries. As I mentioned, he's been a very active leader in the Catholic Peace Building Network, and he wrote the foreword to a book that a number of us worked on some years ago called Peace Building, Catholic Theology, Ethics, and Praxis. He observed that, quote, the ecumenical and interfaith dimension to Catholic peace building is absolutely critical. That ecumenical and interreligious peace building has been central to the Cardinal's own peace building ministry. He has served as member of the Nigerian Interreligious Council and the World Economic Forum Council on the Role of Faith. He has been co-president of the African Council of Religious Leaders, president of the Christian Association of Nigeria, and co-moderator and now honorary president of Religions for Peace International. In his spare time, he has written several books, including Seeking Common Ground, Interreligious Dialogue in Africa in 2013, and Theology in Context, Evangelization and Interculturation in Africa, 2016. In 2010, he founded the Cardinal Onaiyekan Foundation for Peace. The foundation's work is indication of the breadth of his own peace-building activities. It includes programs to develop a new generation of Muslim and Christian peace builders and ethical leaders who can promote good governance, and programs to rebuild lives of vulnerable women and girls in impoverished rural areas and IDP refugee camps. His foundation also recently sponsored a dialogue with African diplomats on peace, and it organized a large cadre of election monitors for the last presidential election. His work on peace and interreligious dialogue has received international recognition, including the Pax Christi International Peace Prize in 2012, and he's been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize that same year. As I mentioned, Cardinal Onaiyekan is a long-term friend of the Catholic Peacebuilding Network and of Notre Dame, and I have very vivid memories of our friendship over the years, including a moment in Burundi when he called on me to give a brief history, knowing I'm a historian, of Catholic social teaching since Rerum Novarum. And Scott, you have 5 minutes. He gave me a short window. And I want to ask him, Cardinal, how does the church play a role when the African state is in shambles, whatever the state may be? And you may not remember this, but I do, but you said, I am the state. What he meant by that was not a statement of pride, but a statement of the church. When a state is not doing what it should be doing, when a government is failing, so often the church is called upon to fill in the gaps, to bring social services, and of course, to bring moral and ethical leadership. And Cardinal Onaiyekan was speaking not only for himself, of course, but for the church in Africa, of which he has been a prominent and powerful leader. I'm really delighted. I hope I can call him a friend. I feel like we have friendship, and I know he's a friend of Notre Dame, the Catholic Peacebuilding Network. So I'm delighted for him to come and take the podium and speak to us today. Thank you, Cardinal Onaiyekan. I want you to speak to the microphone there.
Yes, I will. Thank you very much, Scott, for your very, very generous introduction. You forgot to add that both you and I are we're proud members of the Ethics in Action group. A very select group, wasn't it?
Very elite.
Very elite group. And we were meeting in very beautiful villa in the middle of the Vatican Gardens. Casa.
For 2 years.
For 2 years, we were meeting regularly, and we covered a whole lot of ground. Yes, it was wonderful. We met Professor Husser. Thank you very much. And I thank Jerry Powers, who has taken the responsibility to organize me for this occasion, and my brother, Father Paulinus Odozo, who is my host during my time here in Notre Dame, and a good friend and a brother. I have prepared something like a talk or a paper on the Catholic Church as peace builders in Africa. And I will just read what I have prepared. Nothing terribly profound. Just simple story. But at the age of 79, soon to be 80, in Africa, you take the honor of telling stories. And you expect everybody to listen to you because you are old. You have stories to tell. And here I go. The topic, is it okay if I talk? Is it catching here now?
All right.
It's okay?
It's fine.
Okay. The topic of peace building is a broad one, since it has to do with ways and means of establishing and maintaining good, harmonious relationship among peoples based on truth and justice. We are reminded of the classical definition of St. Augustine of Hippo, who said peace is tranquillitas ordinis, meaning a tranquil environment that is based on good order. I would say the emphasis is on good order, because an environment can be quiet without being in good order. It will be like the good order in the prison yard, or even worse still, be quiet in the cemetery. Peace, worthy of our human dignity, is harmonious environment that is based on justice and peace. This is my introduction. Point one, number one, the church, evangelization, and peace. That is also what the church is all about when she carries out the mission of peace building, following the mandate of Jesus Christ, who said, "Go into the whole world and make disciples of all nations." The primary mission of the church is evangelization, big word meaning spreading the good news of the gospel, which is to introduce people to the person and message of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, made man. That is the primary duty of the church, and it is the primary purpose of the missionary activity of the church. That in itself entails proclaiming and promoting gospel values, especially the gospel values of justice, peace, and love. The two go together, introducing the person of Christ and proclaiming the gospel values that he has brought to our world. Bit on the church in Africa. This is what brought the church to the continent of Africa through the work of missionaries in their different formations. That the mission of the church did not reach the major part of Africa until about only 200 years ago is a mystery of God's grace. I say only 200 years ago, because the history of the church is 2,000 years or more. And this is all the more so when we realize that the Christian faith was at the origins of the church in Northern Africa, Egypt, and the other countries along the Mediterranean coast of Africa. The centers of the early Christian faith in Africa, in Algeria, in Alexandria, in Egypt, Hippo in Algeria, Carthage in modern-day Tunisia, and Tripoli in Libya, to mention only a few. These are mentioned to not only in the early church history, but even in the very New Testament itself. And here we can think of the story of the major Pentecost Day, when the list of people from all over the world were brought out. They included familiar names from Africa. Now, the church in sub-Saharan Africa, I'm moving fast through this history. However, the gospel message did not cross the Sahara Desert to sub-Saharan Africa until much later through European missionaries coming by sea in their search for the route to the Far East. It is all the more significant that while Christianity did not cross the Sahara Desert from Alexandria, Hippo, etc., Islam, on the other hand, which came 600 years after Christianity, not only overran much of the Christian lands in the North Africa, but also made its way through the desert and arrived in the countries of West Africa already about 100 or 200 years after the Prophet Muhammad. May the peace of Allah be upon him. The earliest inroads of Islam in some northern parts of Nigeria is said to date back to about the year 900, about the year 1000. That's long ago. Therefore, we had to wait until God's good time, at the appointed time. But when the time came, God worked his wonders. The spread of the Christian faith in sub-Saharan Africa as a whole, and especially in the west coast of Africa with Nigeria as its epicenter, is a story of wonders in the history of evangelization in the 2,000 years of church history. This is vividly illustrated in the post-synodal document Ecclesia in Africa, published by the year 1996 by Pope John Paul II. When eventually Christianity came into Africa, it came with the message of the gospel, which has a strong element of promoting peace in line with the declaration of the Lord Jesus, who said, "My peace I give to you," not like the peace that the world gives. This is the special gift that comes from God himself, the peace that the Lord Jesus brings to those who believe in him. Christian evangelization and peace. The arrival of Christianity in Africa brought about this peace through the evangelization of our peoples. This was expressed in many ways. For example, the missionaries were very heavily involved, not only in preaching doctrine and morals, but also in promoting integral human development, which in itself builds peace in the society. It can be said, therefore, that the human development activities of the Christian missions in Africa put down the deep roots and foundation for a peaceful community. It is well known that as part of this human development program, the church went into education, especially of the youth. It is on record that Bishop Joseph Shanahan, the Holy Ghost Father, and the head of the Catholic Mission of Southern Eastern Nigeria, well back in the later part of the last century, based in Onitsha, made education a major instrument and method for his evangelization project, especially of the children and the youth. Eventually, the education work of the church became a major item on the development program of our own nations. This was often in collaboration with the colonial administration. In many countries, the independent African countries continued the collaboration in a way that is good for all concerned. In some places, however, for various reasons, the collaboration was discontinued by the independent governments of the African nations. An example being my country, Nigeria. The education which the church imparted on the people was not only academic for teaching people to read and write English, it also had to do with organizing the society in a way that peace would reign. Here we also talk about the church and health services. Another area of human development was that of health services. It is true that our people had their own ways and means of looking after their health needs using available facilities and traditional medical knowledge. However, with contacts with European civilization, it was discovered that modern medical methods are an improvement over the traditional system. For this reason, clinics, health centers, and hospitals became a major item on the agenda of the Christian missions, not only Catholic, but also other Christian missionary denominations. Taking good care of the health needs of the people was thus a way of building peace in the society. The church and human promotion, all this led also to a promotion of human dignity and the social awareness among those who embraced the Christian faith. Because of this aspect of the missionary work, many newly converted Christians became conscious and aware of the need to have their human dignity respected. It is on record that many of the earliest people in the forefront of seeking political independence from European colonial domination got the idea from their Christian faith and upbringing. The Christian knows that Jesus has come to deliver us from all that dehumanizes. Even without using the modern expression of political liberation, the reality was there, as we can see from the history of anti-colonial efforts in our African countries. Putting all this together, we can see how the promotion of integral human development served as a strong basis for a peaceful community. All these are just ways and general discussions about Christian mission, the Christian church in Africa, and building of peace. Now I have number 2, direct ways of building peace. The fact that the church is a family of God means that all the members of the church saw one another as belonging to the same family as brothers and sisters. It means that ethnic groups and tribes that used to be at each other's throat were made to begin to see one another as members of the same family by the fact that they were baptized as Christians. It's often not fully appreciated how effectively conversion to Christianity went a long way to put an end to age-old traditional ethnic conflicts. However, we also know that not only the Catholic Church came to Africa, other Christian groups also came as missionaries. Furthermore, ever before Christianity came to Africa, Islam had arrived and many Africans had become Muslims before the Christian church came. Soon, however, societies that had only one homogeneous religion in the African traditional religion found itself split with different religious ideologies and belongings that in itself created a good amount of conflict and disharmony. That is why the effort of the Catholic Church to bridge the gap created by religious differences is a major contribution of the church in Africa, to peace in Africa. Starting with the African traditional religions, the Catholic Church recognized the dignity of those who decided to remain attached to the religion of our ancestors. Such respect, however, took time to become a normal way of looking at our traditional religions. Whatever may have been the excesses of the earliest missionary activities, we can clearly say that after the Second Vatican Council, the general attitude has changed to respect of the traditional religions. This was carried even further through the 2 special assemblies of the Synods of Bishops for Africa in 1994 and in 2002. The new ideas about inculturation of the gospel entail respect for the positive values of our traditional religion. This meant that we no longer discard our traditional religion as being of no value. Indeed, we realized that the Christian faith had never really rejected all that was good in the religion of our ancestors. In fact, the fact that our people embraced the Christian faith so massively is largely due to the fact that the values of the African religion with which they were familiar could be seen and continued in the basic values of the Christian faith. That is why it can be said that the African who becomes a Christian does not have to throw away his faith in the God that his ancestors worshipped. That is the experience of each of us who came to look at the reality of things. My father, who was one of the first people in our area to embrace the Christian faith, putting aside the practice of the traditional religion, gave me a good lesson in this regard. When I asked him, "Daddy, why did you abandon the God of our ancestors?" His reply was, "Father," I was already a priest at that time, "Father, my son, I did not abandon the God of my ancestors. I discovered Jesus, the Son of God, and I realized I have something better." Oh, this is just an example of one person. All our efforts at interreligious dialogue with those who still remain attached to our traditional religion opens the way for peaceful relationship with them. A bit on ecumenism. The Catholic Church in Africa is also in the forefront of encouraging ecumenical good relations. The early days of serious competition for membership is gradually giving way to getting to respect one another and competing for creating a Christian environment among our people. The progress made in ecumenical relations at the universal level is also replicated to a large extent at the local level. It must be said, however, that ecumenical progress is quite slow in many parts of our continent. Living peacefully with Islam. The most important, however, is our relationship with the Islamic faith, which is the major non-Christian religion in Africa. There is no doubt that we have had a history of very serious conflicts and competition. Even now, there are still many cases of conflicts between communities that are Christians and Muslims, and the conflicts are often interpreted as religious conflicts. We have realized, however, that when we look more closely, many of the so-called religious conflicts are not really religious, but for other reasons which masquerade as religious. The Catholic Church has made much effort to reach out to the Muslim community. This is not an easy task, especially because many of our other Christian denominations do not have the same open mind as we have in this regard, thanks to the teachings of Vatican II. But what it does mean is that the Catholic Church is always in the forefront of seeking reconciliation and peace in situations where Christian-Muslim friction bursts into violence. Our country, Nigeria, is a good example in this regard. Our continent has been now coming more generally to the Catholic Church in conflict situations. Our continent has been experiencing conflicts of all kinds and of different intensity, even in modern times. In all these places, the Catholic Church has always been seen to be working hard toward bringing peace and reconciliation to the society. Our church has always been very much involved within the limit of its resources to provide emergency relief that is always necessary when people are in armed conflict. Women and children especially are left abandoned and need to be cared for. The Caritas organization is increasingly being active in many nations of Africa. Our Caritas Nigeria, for example, some of the most visible providers of emergency aid to displaced victims of armed conflicts in many parts of our country. International relief. Also, because of the international connections of the Catholic Church, assistance from beyond the nation comes through Catholic relief agencies. In our country, for example, the contribution of the Catholic Relief Services, CROS, of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops is very well known. Other groups like the Miserio of Germany, CAFOD of Britain, and similar groups have continued to reach out to help people in need, not only in our country, but in the various theaters of war and conflict. Transforming conflicts. We know it is not enough to be providing relief to the victims of conflicts. Efforts need to be made to transform the conflicts into a peaceful environment. Unfortunately, the facilities for conflict resolution are not often as effective as they should be. The Catholic Church is often not allowed to do the much it can do in this regard. This is because very often the arena is taken over by government agencies and other international peacekeeping outfits, which often do not solve much of the problems. But in each instance, the local church does its best to call people to reconciliation and peace. We know that it is at the very core of the message of our church to promote truth, mutual forgiveness, and reconciliation among communities that have been in conflict, so as to restore a harmonious community based on justice, peace, and love. The efforts to insist on justice, truth, reconciliation, and mutual forgiveness needs the spiritual dimension, which the church is best placed to supply. Much more could be done to mobilize our spiritual and pastoral resources in this regard. The ideal would have been where the church and the state joined hands to tackle these issues in the area of conflicts in our nation. The role of Catholic politicians in public space. Most of the conflicts in our countries are as a result of bad political choices made by the rulers, often not properly elected. Unfortunately, many of such rulers claim to be also Catholics, but they end up being Catholics only in name and not in fact. It has dawned on us that the church must do much more to make sure that the lay faithful who have got the aptitude for public life should be encouraged and formed to take on political positions. This is not in order to put the church in any position of advantage and power over others in the nation. Rather, it is to bring to bear on the political situation the Catholic social doctrine. If this happens at a sufficiently high level, it will make a lot of difference to the situation we now find ourselves. Politics, not a dirty game. For a long time, some Catholics tended to believe that politics is a dirty game, which a good Catholic should not get involved in. That, however, is no longer tenable. The Church has for long, and especially after Second Vatican Council II, been preaching the importance of seeing political activity as a form of apostolate for the establishment of God's kingdom of justice, love, and peace. This is very powerfully stated in the Vatican II document on the Church in the Modern World, Gaudium et Spes, paragraph 75. The efforts we are making in this direction through formation programs, institutions, associations, must be continued unabated until we make an impact in the generally disastrous environment of bad government that is covering most of our African nations. Now, what is the role of the clergy? There were cases in the not too distant past when Catholic prelates, bishops, were requested to moderate national sovereign conferences in some African countries, effectively making them heads of state for the period of the conferences. Examples were my good friend, may God rest his soul, Laurent Sengo in the old Zaire, Archbishop de Souza, also gone to heaven in Benin Republic, and Pojuro in Togo. He is still alive, at least I hope. Such interventions had varying degrees of success. One good lesson from these cases is that it is not the role of the clergy to resolve political issues of the nation. We must continue to stress the fact that the political arena is the right place for the lay faithful and not the arena for the action of the clergy and religious. Even the canon law has made this quite clear. Clergy and consecrated persons who ignore the canon law on this matter and throw themselves into the arena of partisan politics open themselves to serious sanctions. We have seen 2 cases in my country, and so far, none has ended very well. Right now, actually, one of the new governors is a priest who decided to enter politics completely against the instructions of his bishop. We are following up the development, not with joy. However, as clergy and religious, we do have our political role. This is to educate our people, to encourage them, to pray for them as they face the battle in the public square. We must also put ourselves in the position to be mediators in situations of conflict and disharmony in our nations. We cannot be mediators if we are clearly taking sides. This kind of role is not only for bishops and hierarchy, but also for the pastors in the parishes and the religious wherever they are working. I'm finished. Let me conclude. From all we have said, the role of the church in peace building in Africa has to do with basically the preaching and the proclamation of the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ, whose gospel is the gospel of peace, and whose kingdom is the kingdom of justice, love, and peace. May he bestow his peace on our troubled continent through the intercession of our most holy Mother Mary, the Queen of Peace, who is also the Queen of Africa. Thank you for listening.
Hey, you're willing to do so. We have some time for conversation.
Okay.
You want to sit or stand?
I sit.
Sit, okay. Good. I can moderate. The floor is open for questions for Cardinal Onaiyekan. I have 4, but I will go ahead.
Rebecca, and in my previous position, I worked at a Catholic college where there was a lot of tension amongst 2 groups. And one group identified themselves as the Catholics who were inclusive of different people's, especially sexual identities and things like that. And then the other group identified themselves as the group that said, you're not Catholic enough. And so actually the conflict was between the Catholics. And I think that we're seeing that on a lot of them here in the US, between some who identify as being the true Catholics or true Christians, and then the others who are not Christian enough. I wondered how you might respond to that in your own country, or have any advice for us here in the US.
Well, since my talk is on peace building in Africa, peace building, let me go to my country. The scenario there is not exactly like here. We also have a religious demography that is quite different. We're in a country where we have 50-50 proportion between Christians and Muslims. The 50% that are Christians are divided to many, many Christian groups. In that kind of situation, maybe about 20% who are Catholics, we are a minority generally in the country. And there's a tendency for us to hang together. Any Nigerians here will also confirm, you're a Catholic, and so you belong together. The differences within the Catholic faith doesn't appear too strongly in our own experience. And even when there are people with heterogeneous ideas, they are put in their place. There are those who have the authority to teach the right doctrine, not just clergy alone. In fact, what I find in my country is that very often it is the laity themselves who are correcting one another if they think some people are going outside of the norms. The kind of thing I don't see much in Europe or in America. As for here, honestly, much of the things that people are taking seriously, but very serious in the church, when we look at it from where we come from, we just wonder, this shouldn't be too much. These people shouldn't be taking such things very seriously. Is it because you have not got serious problems that you are wasting your time on quarreling over this kind of things, But when you are in a place where you're actually facing life and death issues, you would not have time to be playing games with small matters. I'm not saying that people are not serious, but I'm only saying that, well, it's all very relative. It's all very relative. Right now, as we are talking here, some cardinals, 5 cardinals, have published documents supposed to be asking the Pope to explain certain positions that he is alleged to have taken. When I read that news, I said, for goodness sake, these cardinals don't have problems. If they have real problems, if they are archbishops in the diocese where kidnappers are taking away their reverend fathers and the terrorists are killing people every day. They won't have time for this. But we wait. I don't. These things make big headline news here. It will not make headline news at home. Not just in my country, in many other parts of the world.
I had a question about education in the context of interreligious potential conflict. Of course, the situation in Africa and West Africa is different, but in the Middle East, one of the ways that the Catholic communities often function is to try to provide the best education, even that attracts even the children of Islamic families,
yes.
even people outside the community are drawn to the Catholic schools, and it becomes a way of showing good faith in a common society. Do you see something analogous in Nigeria? Is there an opportunity there, or are people from Muslim backgrounds drawn to the Catholic schools, or
No.
is that not an analogous situation?
Yes and no. In the beginnings of the Catholic missionary work, what I referred to, Bishop Shanahan, it was a deliberate policy for evangelization that we build schools, bring in the children, and the parents who are not Catholic Christians, they are happy to have their children go to school, and they do not prevent their children from also getting baptized. Through that way, a lot of young children became Catholics. And it's a matter of a decade or two, you are having a Catholic community growing. The same thing, not only for Catholic Church, but for other Christian denominations who also built schools. It so happened that this period also coincided with the colonial era. The colonial administrators didn't spend much of their efforts providing popular education for people like the government does here. So they were happy to have the churches do much of the work of education. So it was like the church set up education, which was good, and the colonial administrator liked it, and it is helping the people. At the same time, it was also good for the church. That was the situation for a long time, I must say. Incidentally, at that time, there were some Muslim groups too that were also opening schools. In the case of Nigeria, the only major Muslim school groups that were opening schools were the Ahmadiyas, who were supposed to be a sect. They were considered as a sect of Islam. For a long time, they were practically banned in Nigeria, but they are now again having their ability to show up. Yeah, they were the first group of Muslims to also run schools. But the situation now is different, because now the government has taken over most of the schools. And the major aspect of education, whether primary, secondary, and university, are in government hands. And according to our way in Nigeria, the government schools is a school for everybody. So whether you're a Christian or a Muslim, you are free in the government school. However, the church, and not only the church, other non-government agencies are also building schools. And as it turned out, the so-called private schools are generally better organized than the public schools. The dilemma we have now is that the church has a lot of beautiful schools, first class. And all those who have money send their children to the church schools. Even the teachers and the headmasters of the public schools, they don't send their children to the schools where they are headmaster. They send the children to the Catholic school because that's where they are going to get good education. I say it's a dilemma because on the one hand, we say the government should not be running public schools badly. They should run the public schools in such a way that Children can go to a public school, pay little, and get good education. The other dilemma that that all this brings about is that we are left with running beautiful schools, but beautiful schools for the rich. And as a bishop, I am not happy to give the impression that I'm building schools only for rich people, because my schools for the rich also excludes Catholics who are not rich. And so you want to see how we can balance this without ending up being interested in taking care of rich people. The final solution, obviously, will be when you have a good government where people in government will realize that it is the responsibility of government to provide good quality education for everybody. That will not exclude the cases of private schools with special interest for those who can afford it. But when you have a situation where those who are not rich cannot access good education, it is not good for the country. That is where we are now. Assam, yes.
Thank you, Cardinal. My question is about the relationship between, especially in Nigeria, tribalism and the Catholic Church. And I just wanted to understand if the Catholic Church is trying to detribalize in their teachings or if their programs for detribalize, because it's very obvious that in Nigeria, people tend to be more inclined to their tribe or to their ethnic group, even more than their religious background. I just want to know if the Catholic Church has programs or teachings that sort of preach tribalism and sort of say that everybody is, so long as we all believe in Jesus Christ and everyone is brother and sister, tribe of the tribe, and people should always be beyond their tribe.
This is not only a question for Catholic Church, for all the churches, and to some extent it's also valid for the Muslim community. All the so-called tribes in Nigeria have embraced different kinds of religions. I'm a Yoruba man. My father has raised me up as a Catholic. His brother, my uncle, decided to be a Muslim. And his children and my cousins are all Muslims. We don't see any problem with that. We eat together and we intermarry and all that. As a priest or a bishop, you are getting people coming to the church from different tribes, and you treat them all as Catholics. And in fact, there is definitely a conscious effort to let people know that your Christian faith should bring you together as brothers and sisters. Even if in the village, you are fighting with your next village, when you come to the church, you are brothers and sisters. And that is why we feel that the so-called new religions, or the imported religions, Christianity and Islam, have somehow and had the effect of bringing the differences among the different tribes together. If you go to the mosque on Friday in a place like Abuja, they are all there, Yoruba, not too many Igbos, but they are Yorubas, the Hausas, there are many Edo people as Muslims. But that doesn't stop them from recognizing themselves as different tribes that they belong to. Yeah. So I do not see that as a major problem. The problem comes when you have a particular tribe that is predominantly Christian and another tribe predominantly Muslim, and they have tribal issues. Those tribal issues then become Christian-Muslim issues. The typical case is, you'll be hearing about the herdsmen and farmers clashes. Now, in Nigeria, the herdsmen are itinerant pastors who go around with their cattle. They are almost invariably Fulanis, who are invariably Muslims. They go around and they do not pay sufficient attention. Their cattle enter the farms of the farmers, sometimes eat up the crops of the farmers, and there is a conflict. The conflict is between the Fulani herdsmen and perhaps the thief farmers. If the conflict escalates and they start killing one another, the story that will come out here in America is that Christians and Muslims are killing one another. But the conflict is not because of their religion, but because of socio-economic difficulties that they have. The lesson we have learned in Nigeria is that we see around us that the vast majority of our people have no difficulty living together in peace. If you go to the city of Abuja or the city of Lagos, you go to the market, you are not going to know who is a Muslim and who is a Christian. And you go to the shop and buy where the market is better. But whenever there is issue, once the religious discussion arises, only then that people begin to remember that I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim. So we're trying to let people know that their religious affiliations should not lead them to destroy one another, but we should try to find a way whereby our religion helps us to build a better nation. It's a long task because we believe that if religion is sincere, it should be for peace, not for war.
We have to. Yes, sir. I want to thank you for what I found to be a basically positive presentation. I noticed when you came to politics, you assigned the church a role of educators. I'd like to go one level below that and talk about governance, good governance in a particular way. Again, we're subject to our own press and its own interpretations. But as we look at your country in our news, we hear a lot about corruption, and it's one of the more corrupt countries in the world. We hear about kidnapping, a great example of those young ladies that were taken into the bush for the longest period of time.
Yes.
The violence that goes on, and we know it well because we've experienced somewhat similar thing. The election is before the Supreme Court. Where is the Christian perspective in these matters?
That's a good question. We ask ourselves often, where is the Christian perspective? And we realize that it's difficult to talk about a Christian perspective in Nigeria because there are many kinds of Christians. There are many kinds of Christians. You could ask, where is the Catholic perception? Yes. When you ask for Catholic perception, then we can zero in on our Catholic social doctrine. And that is where you have the statements of the Bishops' Conference and what we do when we are teaching people. But once you broaden it to Christians in general, we are very often in very turbulent.
I'd expect a very clear answer about Catholicism. Forget about the
Okay.
Christians for that. Just
Uh,
answer.
the problem, unfortunately, you cannot forget the other Christians. And our experience has been that much of our problem, even with our Muslim brothers, is because we Christians have not been able to put our mind together, even to tell the Muslims what a Christian is. And the result is that Muslims see all kinds of Christians, they don't, I get the feeling they get confused. I ask myself, if I was a Muslim and I want to become a Christian in Nigeria, where do I go? What church do I follow? And we know that much of our problems, the conflicts between Christians and Muslims, is caused precisely because there are Christians who have bizarre ideas, and there are Muslims who have horrible ideas. And when the two extremes begin to spit fire, they create a conflagration that consumes everybody. But come to the Catholic Church, we have been trying our best. One of the things that has been we are beginning to see very much people asking the simple question: you are a Catholic, why are you behaving like this? Before, we used to be happy that there are Catholics in the government, among the ministers. Now we realize it's not enough to say we have many Catholics in government. What kind of Catholics are there? Are they a good? Are they contributing positively to the system? And they will not be if they have not been properly, if they haven't gone through some kind of Christian formation in public life. We realize, and I think we can say it is a great area where we have still a long way to go. What are the structures we have? What we have it's only recently we are having a Catholic university. So we've not been having places where we can train Catholic lawyers, Catholic politicians. The most we had were what all these chaplaincies in the government institutions, which we could not do much more than encouraging pastoral activities. Now we are beginning to take it more seriously, and it will not happen overnight. And when you have a situation of endemic corruption, it's very difficult to tell somebody you should not be corrupt because you're a Catholic. If once it's in that system, it is. We are believing that it is possible to run the nation in such a way that corruption does not completely make good governance impossible. But unfortunately, there's still a lot of that corruption around, and impunity. People steal billions, even of dollars. You don't know what they do with billions of dollars, but they steal them. And no accountability. And we keep saying this cannot continue. And we believe that the movement we are seeing around is that there's more and more people saying, no, this will stop because it's not taking us anywhere. Now, where does the church come into this? We are hoping that the churches and the mosques will join together in fighting against those things that are bringing down the nation. That is the position people like me are taking. Because if we don't join hands together, then religion will be completely, will not be able to perform its due role within the public environment.
Thank you.
Stephanie?
Okay.
Stephanie, you don't want to talk again?
You answered the question I had.
Oh,
Responding to this.
okay.
During the military year, the Nigerian Episcopal Conference, and in fact, I remember that when everybody else was down, pushing that button, the person was the last man for the family between Turkey and the districts and the military, yes, or looked at them in the position. Those generations that execute the state. I hope that the Bishop Conference simply just and like family, but I'm saying to you, very, business that nobody knows. So now we have corruption, massive scale, issues of weapons, and all that and that. But this one's very effective body doesn't seem to be in a position to do much. Why is that? I mean, I don't understand. They say not even people for like us who make a living doing those things because there's no support. That was not the Nigerian Bishop Conference and so what do you explain everything?
I don't know whether I can answer your question. Yes. I'm still in that bishops' conference. I'm still among those who contribute towards the drafting of our communiques. And the communiques, of course, are drafted on the basis of a brainstorming that is done among the bishops' conference about the issues we should raise and so on. Some of the issues are so obvious that you even feel, what's the point talking about it again? We'll be saying it all the time. But for me, the major line of demarcation is under the military rule. The country was being run by soldiers who were succeeding one another depending on who has the gun at the right time. It was clear enough that this is not the way to run a civilized country. So the position of the bishops' conference was clear that no, military rule must go. We want democracy. The only problem is that we're not the only ones who was asking for democracy and for the end of military rule. But it so happened that, well, the way we are in Nigeria, the journalists and the political analysts and even politicians who were making a lot of noise about end of military rule were rounded up, many of them, hounded. Some were driven into exile, this famous Nadeko. But somehow the same Abacha regime and other military people who were very, very intolerant of opposition from politicians and activists were extremely tolerant of whatever the church says. Because the things we say are the same thing that those who have been driven away or put in jail are saying. And what do we read from that? It's the same problem we're having now. That somehow you have a country where the religious leader is given some kind of respect. Whatever you say, my reading of it is that if you go to the military era, that the bishops are not happy with the military boys don't care because there's nothing that the bishops can do about them. We can't organize a coup or gather around ourselves a few young boys and arm them to overthrow the government. We will not do that. But when a group of when a political force is moving in that direction, they go quickly on them. The same thing seems to be happening even now. Now we have no longer We are no longer under military rule. We are supposed to be under democracy. And we are going through the motions of elections. But everything is being done badly. Rigging all over the place. Governance by deceit and duplicity. And we keep shouting about that. What else can you do but say this is wrong? Perhaps our language could be more sharp, but bishops learn to be a bit, can you say, diplomatic. We don't want to appear to be attacking anybody. We keep talking in terms of principles, what should be done, and we end up with call for prayer and all that. That's the normal thing we do. So I don't think we can compare the situation in Nigeria during the military rule with the situation now. For me, the present situation is worse than the military rule. Because a rigged election is worse than a military coup. That is my feeling. Because in the military coup, the military boy does not claim that you have put him in power. He's very sincere in his ruthless grab of power. Whereas in a rigged election, you have not voted for these guys. They manipulate the system. They get themselves announced as the winners of the election. And you are supposed to pay allegiance to them as your true leaders. So they've deceived you and they expect you to accept it. Very difficult.
Can I ask two of my four questions very quickly? Number one, I just thought of something I'd like to ask you, and then I'll go with the other question. The first one is, my mentor, Marty, church historian, Lutheran, wrote an article once on his many articles that was about a time in American history before Vatican II, late 19th century. And the title of the article was something like, "The schools stopped teaching hell, no one noticed." And it was about the waning of the King James Bible's hold over the culture, and et cetera. So my question, this is a question I have more generally, is why people who engage in brutality, in murder, in deep corruption, in theft, in the betrayal of the innocent, do they not fear hell? I know we don't in the church since Vatican II teach fire and brimstone, but I think maybe every once in a while I'd like to hear a fire and brimstone sermon. Do they not fear they not have a sense of the afterlife and a kind of comeuppance, or is that completely weeded out even among the so-called Catholics who are not really practicing?
Let me give an example similar to what you are saying. In Nigeria, where you're sworn into office, you swear. I swear, so help me God. And you choose between swearing on the Bible or swearing on the Quran. It is said all over the place that Nigerian Muslims and the Nigerian Christians, they don't care. They're telling lies, carrying Bible and Quran. But that if we were to change and bring back the gods of our ancestors and tell people to swear with a cutlass, they would be more careful. No, but that is the word they say, that because the cutlass is the instrument for swearing. But in those days, if you swore on the cutlass and you then told a lie, they said the thing will hit you. I'm not sure whether it is actually the cutlass that hits you. I get the feeling that it's the people themselves who devise a way of punishing you for going against the life.
Some evangelicals in Africa throw Bibles over the walls into Muslim enclaves. Maybe it hits them on the head. But anyway.
But that comes back to what you're saying. I do preach about hell, especially when the readings talks about hell. If you are saying Mass and you have Matthew chapter 35 as your reading about the last judgment, you must talk about hell now, because Jesus says very clearly, "Away to you eternal." You have to talk about it. So we do talk about hell. The only thing is we also talk about the mercy of God, and some people even say this mercy of God thing is too much. Yeah, that they expect that God should be punishing these people who have taken the law into their hands. We say, well, God does not want the death of a sinner, but He wants them to be converted and live. For how long will God be patient? You don't have to. We cannot tell God not to be patient anymore, because if you, Lord, should mark our guilt, not who would survive.
Yeah, exactly.
But can I ask a follow-up there?
Let's do quickly. We've got one other person that has a
Is this also an indication of a secularism that is called where you can preach there? Just like the United States. I mean, there is secularism creeping into Africa, and the political class and all that have been violent.
I wouldn't say secularism. The mindset in the traditional religion, which believes very much in all these malicious geniuses and spirits. There's no way you can continue it in this day and age. So even if you talk about, even if you believe in hell, it's not the same way as if you think there's immediate punishment for whatever you do. That makes, I'm sure even you people who are preaching here to people who don't believe in hell, you still have to find a way of talking to them about embracing some kind of amount of accountability, moral accountability for how you behave your life. Even if you take the more or less the functional approach that, look, if the society continues to behave badly, everybody will suffer it eventually. It's a very good argument, clearly. The society has a limit to how much it will bear bad behavior with impunity. No, it will fall. That's what we keep saying now in Nigeria. That a country where bribery, corruption, stealing is the order of the day cannot continue like that. The sooner we change, the better.
Just one final question before we adjourn.
Your Eminence.
How are you? It's an old friend from Religions for Peace.
Yeah,
Oh,
so I
good.
worked with Peace for leading. I wonder, because I just finished my master's program at the PO School and Institute, and just now that I've been focused on studies, on my studies in this area, I wonder from your reflection over the years, leading interreligious dialogue within Nigeria and internationally, if you could share, because we've talked a lot about corruption and some nasty things, maybe if you could share some insight or a story or an analysis of some of the strategies that are most helpful for interreligious dialogue or collaboration among religions, whether it be on fulfilling social basic needs or social services.
Well, you use the word logistics or method to be successful. For me, I always emphasize the importance of friendship. And the interesting thing with friendship is that you can create it, and you can also put a barrier. What I have found is that talking with, for example, in our own case, Christians and Muslims, getting myself involved in many occasions of us talking together, not even directly about Christian-Muslim issues and differences, but even talking together about common issues that we have, the problems of the nation. How can we work it? You find ourselves talking, and we're not talking as Christians and Muslims. We're just talking as Nigerians, and a kind of common mind develops across our religious borders. For me, this is where I've found the greatest possibility for making progress in inter-religious dialogue. When you then finally get people who become very good friends with you, you have friends, and I go to church on Sunday. He goes to the mosque on Friday. When we're arranging when we shall meet, we have to take note of the fact that we don't organize our meeting on Sunday morning, and we organize a meeting on Friday afternoon. But we have some common grounds to work upon. I think that is the philosophy of Religions for Peace, as you know, where we emphasize commonly shared values, and because they are our commonly shared values, which are there despite our differences, or even with our differences. Beyond that, I don't know what to say. And one other thing I also have learned is don't expect everybody to be a friend of yours or to be happy with you, you know. When we are working on interreligious dialogue, we should be ready to know that there are people who will be spoilers. Don't wait for everybody to come along. So the few that want to work together, you keep moving. You keep making progress little by little. And at least if you can get a couple of 100 people to change their attitude and to refuse to be sucked into the general mood of their group, then progress will be made.
Cardinal Onaiyekan is known to jump on a plane and fly across several time zones in an ocean or two and land at his destination and get to right to work. I don't have his DNA, but it's an example of his great generosity and service to the church and world. And I am so honored that he continues to be our friend, and that he continues, even after he has earned his retirement, to continue to jump on planes and be present to so many people as a leader of the church. So thank you for your service and for being with us again today.
Thank you very much. Thank you all of you, the audience in this hall. I'm told that there are other people who have access to what we have been saying through modern technology. I greet all of them too. God bless all of you. And I hope everybody will also pray for me and for my nation, Nigeria. I'm still praying that before I go to paradise, the country will be a much better place.
Pray for that.